welcome to another episode of Poor Life Choices with Miss Barney. Today's poor choice is me once again waiting till like 9 o'clock to start filming this. Just kidding, it's welcome back to History with Miss Barney, episode 13. I hope your Wednesday is treating you well. Things aren't going so great on my end. All of my trashy reality TV shows have either ended or like had their finales canceled because of the coronavirus. And I, for one, am not very pleased about it. Buster is joining us again. This guy at a supermarket gave me this mask and like super sweet of him, but I'm pretty sure it's like made from a training bra, so I didn't want to wear it, so I figured, you know what, Buster would appreciate that more. In attendance question news, yesterday, who won? Cookies and Cream defeated whoever they were up against, I don't even remember, so they're moving on to the final four. And then today is Rocky Road versus Moose Track, so I really hope you choose the right one, otherwise I'm gonna be super pissed. Just kidding. Anyway, let's begin. We are talking about the strategies and the strengths and weaknesses of the two sides that were going to participate in the Civil War. Yesterday, we talked all about how 11 slaveholding states decided that enough was enough and they were going to leave America and form their own country called the Confederate States of America. The new president, though, they have a picture of him in here. I had to read this whole book in college. Didn't become a history major. Anyway, this new president, Mr. Lincoln, wasn't just gonna let that happen though. He was going to use military force to bring these states back into the Union and save the United States of America. So after Confederate troops attack Fort Sumter, which is an American fort located near South Carolina, war is inevitable. Fighting has already happened and it's just gonna get worse. So both sides decide that they need to start preparing. So pay attention as I go over the strategies and the strengths and weaknesses of these two sides, because at the end of this video you are going to grade them, which I will be explaining more about in just a little bit. And I guess I should clarify that the two sides are as follow. The North is called the Union. These are states that stayed loyal to America, and the South was called the Confederates, and those were states that had tried to leave America. Okay, so let's start with both sides' strategies. So let's start with the Union strategy. There are three parts to the Union strategy, okay? The first part, they're gonna blockade the southern ports so that Europe cannot continue to trade with the South. This will cut them off from food supply and manufactured goods. Second part, they're gonna take control of the Mississippi River so that they can block Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas off from the rest of the Confederate states, and so that the southern states can't use the river to transport troops or other supplies amongst the Confederate states. Third part is they are going to take control of the new Confederate capital, which is Richmond, Virginia, because that is where the Confederate government is located. The southern strategy, on the other hand. First part, they are going to fight a defensive war. They want to bring the Union troops into Southern territory and exhaust them. Two, they're counting on getting help from Europe, because remember, the South had a really big head because they supplied the world with so much cotton. They thought there's no way Europe won't help us, because where are they going to get their cotton from otherwise? And then the third part is just like the Union, they are planning on taking control of their enemy's capital. In this case, that is Washington, D.C. So that is it for strategies. Let's move on to a new category, which is government and leadership. Let's start with the Union, because why not? The Union's government was fairly well organized, to be honest with you. I mean, even though our country couldn't keep it together for 100 years, we'd at least figured out how to have like a fairly well organized government. So anyway, the government is organized. They did have more money than the South did. Lincoln was also a really good leader to have. He had very strong leadership skills. But then we come to the leadership skills of the military officers. In general, the Union did not have the best military officers. There were a few good ones, and there were a lot of really bad ones who were really timid and they weren't nearly aggressive enough to like face this war. Okay, moving to the Confederates. The Confederate government was like brand new, and so it is not as well organized. They had less money than the North did. Their president, Jefferson Davis, had pretty weak leadership skills and did not do a very good job. The place where the South shined though was their military officers. They had outstanding military officers. When the United States was still together, these guys were the best military officers in the army, except now they were siding with their states, and so they had abandoned the US military and were with the Confederate military, which was not good news for the Union. To the next category, which is resources. So with resources, let's go over the South first, why not? One resource they had was that they were going to be fighting on their home ground, so they knew the territory. They had a smaller population than the North did. They also had a smaller railroad network than the North did. Most of the farmland they had grew cash crops, not really food crops, so that might be an issue. And they had hardly any factories to make the manufactured goods like weapons or uniforms. So moving on to the North, the Union, whatever we're calling it right now, the North had a bigger population. They had way more factories, so they could make their own weapons and their own uniforms in these factories. They had a pretty extensive and well set up railroad network to move supplies, to move troops around. They had more farmland that grew food crops, not just cash crops, but they weren't going to be fighting on their home ground, so it was going to be unfamiliar territory to them. Next category, military power. Once again, starting with the Confederates, the South had a very skilled army. A lot of their soldiers were very familiar with guns and horses because of the rural community, but they didn't have as big of a population to draw people from, so their army was going to be smaller, and they didn't have a navy, and they didn't have a ton of war machinery. Moving on to the Union, the North had a big population, and so they had more men, they had a bigger army, they had a navy, and they had a lot of war machinery. Final topic, motivation. So in regards to motivation, what I'm talking about here is like how motivated were these sides to fight this war. The Union did not have very strong motivation. Their motivation was pretty weak. A lot of these guys didn't really even know why they were fighting the war. Like, were they fighting to free the slaves, or were they fighting to keep the country together? And honestly, were they willing to die for either of those things? The other problem the Union had is that they were expecting the war to be over quickly. Spoiler alert, that was not gonna happen. And so if the war isn't gonna end quickly, then their morale is probably gonna go down the toilet. The Confederates were like the complete opposite. They had really strong motivation because they were fighting to protect their way of life, even though that way of life was terrible. And they were also fighting to protect their homeland. So yeah, their motivation was really strong. Okay, so that is where both sides stand as the war is starting. So now it is your turn to hand out some grades here. What you are going to be doing is writing a report card for the North and the South and grading them on their strategies, on their government and leadership, their resources, their military power, and their motivation. So you'll be handing them a grade on the A through F scale. So an A would be like, wow, this category has so many advantages and it is going to be a huge boost and will probably help you win the war. An F, on the other hand, is like, wow, you have so many disadvantages in this category. This is awful. It might even lose you the war. And of course, like B's, C's, and D's, those are kind of like mixed. They might lean more towards the positive or more towards the negative. You decide. All right, so let me show you how that's gonna look real quick.
All right, so this is what the report card looks like. There's an area to give grades to the Union and then one to give grades to the Confederates. So you're going to put a letter grade right here for each of the categories. And then right here, this is important. You need to write a comment explaining why you gave the grade that you did, because a good grade giver can always justify why they gave that grade. So let's say I'm giving a grade for the military strategy for the Confederates. I'm going to put timestamps in the video in the description so you can go back and listen to that information. So go back, listen to all of it, think about it. How well would that help them with the war? I would give them a C for that strategy. And then right here, I'm going to write a comment explaining why. So that's just my opinion. You can give whatever grade you want. You just have to be able to justify it in the comments. So do that for all of the categories for both the Union and the Confederates. And then at the bottom, there is a short writing prompt that says, based on the grades you gave both sides at the beginning of the Civil War, who do you think had the best chance at winning the war? Explain your answer. So after you fill out everything on this report card, you can turn it in and you are good to go.
So you are gonna have 2 days to get this done. I hope you enjoy being the person who hands out the grades for once. All right, that's what I've got for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, good luck on your report cards. I will see you later. Miss you, and goodbye.